I'm going to do a little experiment to make sure my screen sharing is working. I'm going to share a PowerPoint slide to see if that's coming through. To all y'all, do you see a web of support with a black and white hand-drawn web of support? If you do, can you post that to the chat? And I'll stop sharing. Is it coming through? Yeah. Nice. And about 2 minutes, folks. Like people can see it. That's all good news in this modern COVID area of schooling at home, distance learning, thriving in chaos, being resilient. I'm 60 years old, so teaching old dogs new tricks comes to mind, that old metaphor that I used to hear when I was a kid. And I see Amy in Thorn Bay is just logged on, she's waving. In about 1 minute.
Good morning.
I'm on my family's farm.
Oh,
go.
Sorry, Derek. I was just saying good morning from Southeast Alaska. Actually, afternoon, I guess, where you are.
Yeah. Amy is 4 hours different than you are. She's 4 hours earlier. And when we first were talking to Muncie about this in-service, we thought we were going to start early in the morning your time, which would have been 4:30 a.m. Amy's time, and she was game. So the life of a teacher, man. 4:30, yeah, I'll do an in-service and for the East Coast time zone. Okay, everybody, it is 12:15, and welcome. We're going to hit the ground running here. My name is Derek Peterson. Who am I, and why do you care? And the reason I'm going to talk a little bit about why you might care is because of bias. And these days, we all have bias. Where we grow up matters. And so I was raised rural. I'm on the family farm here in Red River Valley of North Dakota. My family came to this country in the 1888. And I'm in the very house that my great-grandfather built. And so here I sit. About me, I've lived aboard a sailboat, lived in Alaska for 25.
Derek, can you unmute yourself, please?
Oh, sorry. So the host helped me, huh?
Sorry.
Okay.
I was trying to mute everybody and it muted you too. My apologies.
All right. Good on you. When I was 15, I founded my first youth center in a little town called Moose Lake, Minnesota, with the help of the mayor and the school principal. Back in the 90s, I was named in a magazine, one of America's emerging leaders in the American West, which promptly caused me to change my career and try to tandem bicycle the Western Hemisphere for 2.5 years. That's another story altogether. When I came back from that trip, I became Alaska's Child and Youth Advocate. I got this work that you're about to see was funded and embedded in No Child Left Behind. Remember back 20 years ago, they were just talking about SEL, social emotional learning, talking about community engagement. We were one of the 2 programs funded in perpetuity to do that work. I was named Alaska Educator of the Year by the School Administrators Association. I was Alaska Prevention Professional of the Year by the Social Workers and Drug and Alcohol folks. When I left that work, I worked for the United Nations out of Victoria, British Columbia, out of the university there for a while. And in Indiana, we're working in Zionsville. We've worked in Indianapolis. We've worked in South Bend. That's where my brother and sister-in-law live with their kids, 5 kids. And I've been on a 5-year National Science Foundation grant with Purdue School of Engineering. And so that is a little bit about my bias and what I've done. You can see probably in that I'm a huge believer in freedom and choices, and I want young people to be able to have that in their life, and that is what I have spent my life pursuing. Why do some people bounce back from adversity? Why do some take risks? Why do some start businesses? Why do some thrive in adversity when they come from really tough households and families? And why do some just seem to get going no matter what? So what we've done is we've taken a framework, the protective factors and learning supports, because you're all educators. The Department of Education of the US measures learning supports. If you worked for CDC or SAMHSA, the drug and alcohol folks, you would call them protective factors. They're essentially the same thing. It's the building blocks of what makes a kid a fully functioning, resilient human being who's civil, who does well in school, who contributes to his community, who avoids drugs and alcohol, etc. And so what we've done in our work, and remember, this was funded through No Child Left Behind, so the tune of about $28 million. And all $28 million means is that you can hire really smart people to do research. And so what we've done is taken something very complicated, youth development, human development, and we broke it into a story and a measurable framework that a busy Head Start dad could understand in about 15 minutes, or a busy school superintendent, or a busy high school teacher or elementary school teacher. And so what we've done is we've taken love. If you ask me what we do, we can measure how much love a kid feels in their life. And we can correlate that amount of love they feel to their civility and to their school and to their student success in a school. Now, love is kind of touchy-feely for some people, and they think that's not scientific enough. So we call it support. And the kids don't mind that it's love, but sometimes adults, especially Purdue, we call it support. We can measure how much support a teenager or a college student feels and correlate that to their thriving. And so what we do is take that sunshine, that support, that kind of generic idea, that vague idea, and drop it through a prism of science. And we come up with the spectrum, right? Roy, G, Biv. And so what we talk about, you see on your screen, we have a full spectrum approach to student development. And so real quickly, I'm going to go through this, and Amy is going to make it even more meaningful to you. But we start with the color red. Red is simply the rule of 5. It says that every young person, every teenager, every adult, including you all on this call, need at least 5 caring adults in their life. What's significant about this is it can be mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, and auntie in rural Indiana. And if you have a loving, intact family, matter of fact, you won the lottery of life. And our research says there's really no better way to get a web. However, that's not typical. And you can have a single mom. You can have a single mom, 2 teachers, a coach, and someone from the church, synagogue, temple, or mosque. You can have a mom and dad who moved from Indianapolis to Muncie for a job promotion, 2 teachers, and a neighbor. What's significant about our work, you can have foster mom, foster dad, 2 teachers, and a coach. What's significant about our work is that the rule of 5, as we call it, the rule of five, the power of more. It doesn't really matter who those people are as long as the teenager, the kid is feeling love and support from them. And that was controversial 25 years ago. You can imagine people didn't like to hear that there are other ways to do this than intact, loving families. But I think we all know now, 25 years later, it's common sense and common experience that there's many ways to have a family. Orange are tangible supports, and those are the strings in this web of support that young people catch from these adults. And this was really important to us because when we started this work 30 years ago, we really bought into Hawkins and Catalano's model of communities that care, as well as Peter Benson's work with the Search Institute in developmental assets. And we invested millions of dollars in Alaska trying to bring more developmental assets in a kid's life and to actually bring more of Hawkins and Catalano's protective factors in. And to be honest, we couldn't do it. And we put millions of dollars into it. It wasn't changing kids' lives until we learned that this rule of five, that these protective factors came from people. And so what does that mean to you specifically? For a teenager to list that they have the tangible support of school, or homework, they need to catch that from a supportive adult in their life. They can catch it from you, a coach. They can catch it from a parent, from a person from their faith community. But it's caught. It just can't be present without those adult relationships. And so we measure 26 of those strings. The next one is intangibles. So tangibles just mean that they're easy to measure. Intangibles are way hard to measure. Courage, integrity, honesty, positive view of personal future, some motivations, right? What we have learned is that while we want kids to have all of these values, and we say that sometimes we say America, we want to have some more American values, or values are eroding. What we're realizing in our work, that connection is eroding, and that you indeed catch courage, integrity, honesty from anchoring adults in your life. Now, this is nurture. This changes a whole lot with divorce, with people passing away, with teachers being promoted or retiring or changing careers. This web of support that you see before you changes pretty quickly. What is innate is green, is growing the balloon. That is the innate resilience found in each individual kid. And you know as teachers that most of your kids are normal, typical, right? They have a typical amount of resilience in them. You know that about 10% are a little smaller balloons. Doesn't mean that it just means that they're more likely to fall through the cracks. And of course, 10% of kids are Goodyear blimps, and they're huge balloons with a great deal of innate resilience. You all can probably think of kids right now who you think, man, that kid comes from a tough household, but I think he or she's going to be okay. Blue is scissors cuts. Blue are scissors cuts, and these are actions that the kid does that erodes the web of support under them. And it's also actions that happen to the child or teenager that erode the web under them. And what we do in our work when we work directly with young people is we teach them what the scissors cuts are, and we teach them to measure them for themselves. Matter of fact, unlike some of the work done in trauma, we of course are trauma informed, and we do that work, but we allow a young person to define what's a scissors cut and what's trauma instead of having us define it for them. And what we do is we get a lot more self-agency and self-efficacy from kids when they get to label whether that divorce was trauma or whether that divorce was a scissors cut to their web. Because there are traumas in kids' lives, and what trauma doesn't change the size of a balloon, trauma just adds weights to a teenager. And what we're trying to do is show teenagers that they can cope with their weights, but of course, all you know, being trauma informed, if you have too much weight, right, then that's just too much for anybody to bear, a big balloon or a small balloon. The next color is significant, and that's what Amy's going to talk to you about, is indigo. Indigo is caring for the carers. And this says that every one of you teachers needs, or support people on this call, you need a web under yourself. Matter of fact, what Amy's going to show you is that you can't give what you don't have, because you may not even value web of support if you didn't need one? Let's say you're a teacher who are a huge balloon and you say, I don't need anybody. I can do all this myself. I don't need a support network. Well, you're not going to be very empathetic to a typical kid on a typical web who does need one, or a small balloon kid on a thicker web who does need one. And what we're learning by doing work for sure in Purdue Honor School is those young people who are way bright in the honors program at Purdue, way bright, when they started learning about the web of support for themselves and having to use Purdue University to enhance their web, we went from a retention rate of 68% to 92%. And why that's significant is Purdue doesn't want to lose the smartest kids in the country who are coming to Purdue on full scholarships to pursue their dreams. And Purdue didn't change much else except get more focused on measuring the web of support for kids. Finally, social norms is like a wind that blows across this whole web of support. And that that wind can be positive. It can actually be a nurturing place that makes web building normal, or it can be less nurturing. It can make a web almost impossible to build. And so the web of support, what I just showed you is data. It is a good story, but it's based in data. I can tell you that in our national samples, based on tens of thousands of kids, that we expected to find a bell curve. Like all of you know, any data set is supposed to break into a bell curve, where 50% of the kids would have 3 adults or more, and then 50% would have less. What we found instead is that we have an hourglass on its side. 38% of the kids we've measured so far have 0, 1, or 2 adults in their life. And 40% of the kids have 5 or more. And the record is 27 out of a school in Tennessee. And so you can imagine that being teachers, being coaches, being counselors, what kids you're having better luck with. The thickly web kids typically are thriving. They don't need as much from you. They're able to cope, bounce back, probably even in this days of COVID, able to do schooling at home. And you all worry about, like Amy and I do, about kids who are thinly webbed. They're having a really hard time right now. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Amy Mcdonald from Alaska. Amy has taught every grade level. She's a school counselor. She does direct work with youth with me around the United States and around Canada. And Amy, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Derek. What a great introduction to the web of support. I really appreciate your introduction, so we can dig a little deeper today. A couple of just little things about me. As Derek said, ran the gamut of education, and I love it every day. And one of the reasons that I love this work that I get to do with Derek is because once I learned about this and I understood the value of webs of support for kids, not just teenagers, you guys, kindergarten on up. My son, when he was 2, right? Once I learned the value of this, having a web of support for kids, having a web of support for myself and for my friends and other adults in my life, life just kind of gets easier. We still have a lot of work. Teaching is still the best profession in the world, and also one of the hardest professions in the world. You know, we all know the data about how teachers and nurses, right, highest stress jobs in the country. And when you have a web of support, when kids understand it, when adults understand it, and we work together to build webs of support, boy, it certainly makes teaching and learning a whole bunch easier. So that's my soapbox for teaching and learning. Like Derek said, I live in Southeast Alaska, the most beautiful place in the world. The island I live on is Prince of Wales Island, and Derek, I believe the 3rd largest in the U.S. Possession. And we hunt and we fish and we gather, we subsist a lot here. So we are outside with our people, our community members. Often we see them outside of the school frequently, and that is very valuable about what we're going to talk about today. I'm excited that Muncie has taken on the Building Webs of Support as a community initiative. I've never worked in an area where that's happening. And I think that having a community focus and the school also understanding the building of webs of support will only amplify what we can do for kids in our schools. So good on you guys for community initiative and the school jumping in. So pretty exciting. A couple of logistical things. I'm going to share my screen with you. There we go. We are going to use Mentimeter for a few of our activities today. And I don't know how many of you have used Mentimeter in the past, but just for those who haven't, if you have a secondary device or a second tab on your computer, can you please go to menti.com, and it's going to ask you for a code when you get there. And the code is on the top of the screen I'm sharing with you, 34891. It's not the code on the image on the slide. I'm sorry about that. 34891 is the code. Because of how we built our presentation, that little sentence, go to www.menti.com and use the code 34891 will be on the top of every single slide. That doesn't mean that we're going to use Menti on every single slide. So don't worry, you won't be over Mentied, I promise. Okay. Thank you for all the reactions telling me that people are there. That's awesome. Really helps me know what's going on. This whole, I'm sure, yeah, I know you know, this whole learning how to do all of these teaching and learning things virtually has been certainly a steep curve for a lot of us, but we're getting there, and our kids are getting there, and thank goodness for them, because they're way better at technology than we are. So, all right, so we're gonna move forward. So we're gonna start by talking about anchors. Derek mentioned in our story, red, the first color when you shine that love through the prism of science is red. And in our story, we really want everybody to have 5 anchors, 5 caring and connecting people in their webs. Not everybody does. And as you can imagine, when we start talking to youth about it, some of them say they have none. And we celebrate it. We say, rock on, you know, now you know the story, now you know how to find them. Now you know how to connect with adults, now you know how to find anchors. It goes the same with us. There's a lot of research out there that says the older we get, the fewer friends that we have, or the more lonely that we become. And if we focus on integrating in our community and finding adults to thicken our webs, then we'll beat that research, right? Okay, so anchors, they are the people who are there for you whenever, no matter what. You know, you can reach out to them and not have any guilt about it. They're those people that you can call at 3 o'clock in the morning and you know they'll answer the phone. We know that they're gonna support us. They're gonna hold us accountable. They're gonna have higher expectations for us than we have for ourselves. They're in many cases going to be able to teach or coach us to become the people that we want to be. So I just want you to take a few minutes to maybe just a minute, not very long, to think about who are those people, a handful, that you could call at 3 in the morning and they would answer the phone. So just think about that for a minute. Okay, for some reason, Derek, I might ask you as the co-host, if you could, for some reason I can't stop sharing my screen. Oh, maybe I can now. Thank you. Awesome. All right, that worked perfectly. I just had to say it out loud and then the button magically appeared. So I'm just, thank you for thinking for a few minutes about who are those people that you can call at 3 o'clock in the morning and they would answer the phone and be there for you. They're part of all the areas of our lives. And oftentimes when we think about who those people are, I think adults are really segmented more than kids are sometimes. And we think of, oh, okay, who are the people I have all these people that I interact with professionally. And then I have some people that I interact with personally. And sometimes they don't mesh. And that there's positives to that. But I want us to really think about people in both of those circles of our lives, thinking about where they fit into our lives and how they help us to grow our webs, to thicken our webs by adding strings to our webs, right? So for example, if I'm thinking, my son is 20 and he's alive, he's made it through his teenage years, which is, we celebrate. And he's a pretty good kid, right? But he's 20. Still, those decisions, we all know brain development, right? He's not quite there yet. So when I have questions and I think about, gosh, what do I do in this parenting situation? There are people in my personal web that I can call, right? My friend Carrie, her kids are about 5 years older than mine. I oftentimes watch how she parents her kids, or when I'm struggling with Eric, I say, Carrie, what did you do with Tim in this situation, right? So reaching out to Carrie to help me with those parenting strategies so that Eric and I can continue to have a positive relationship. So I also think, that I have a bunch of people in my professional life that I can reach out to if I'm struggling with a student in my classroom, or if I'm looking for some support to become a better visual, a teacher using visuals over virtual teaching. There's lots of people I have a friend, Crystal McGill, and she does a lot of online presentations. I ask her frequently, what would you do in this situation to make this a little bit more interactive, more sharing, right, for people? So I'm going to share a little story with you about an anchor of mine. Let me see if you can, there you go. So this is Lauren, and Lauren is a huge anchor in my life, both professionally and personally, but it started out solely professionally. We first met, he was a teacher. One of my things about my school district is we have 7 schools. The largest one has 75 kids or so, K-12, and the smallest one has 10 kids, K-12, because in the state of Alaska, you have to have 10 kids to get funding. So that's the smallest you can go. So Lauren was a teacher at one of those small outer site schools, and I was the principal at the largest school in our district, Thorn Bay. And we had at Thorn Bay School this amazing group of creative students. And these creative students were really struggling maintaining themselves in the typical school day and this typical structure of our school day. And so they needed a different plan. And I knew that, but I wasn't quite sure what to do. I wasn't quite sure how to do it. So Lauren had come to our district from a residential teaching facility outside of Prince of Wales Island. So I called him one day and I said, hey, I got this group of creative kids. They're super cool, but they're wreaking havoc in the rest of the building, and I need to come up with a different plan. And he spent countless hours with me, like so many hours, making a plan to meet the unique needs of this group of students. And so fast forward a couple more years, Lauren has over time now become the superintendent in our district. And now, instead of him being a teacher at an outer site, now he's my boss. And one day he came into my office, and I could tell by the look on his face that he was like ready for some serious conversation. And I thought, I wonder what's going on, you know? But we'd built up a really, really positive relationship. I was comfortable with this, what's going to happen, you know? And he sat down and he said, Mimi, I've spent years watching you develop as an educator, both in your role as the lead teacher, principal, you're also the counselor. Our district has no counselor. So you're playing two very different roles. And so he started to kind of ask me questions about both of those positions. And he didn't do a lot of talking, right? He let me do a lot of the talking. And finally he said, this maybe an hour, he said, so Amy, what do you want to do? You want to be the principal or do you want to be the counselor? And I was like, oh my gosh, like he completely made me reframe how I was looking at my future in education. He supported me in making this decision that really helped amplify my strengths, gave me joy, and promoted my evolution as an educator. It was super, as an anchor to me. He let me make the decision with his input. He threw me strings by thinking out of the box. He and I think a lot about how we interact with kids. So it really helped to deepen our relationship. Eventually, we learned about each other, that we had things that we enjoyed doing outside of school also that were similar. So he's an amazing hunter, and he knows about Sitka blacktail. They're amazing, right? And he is amazing at finding them, and it was awesome. He taught me a ton about hunting. He's obviously from the picture, he runs a charter boat operation, and he's taken me out on his boat and showed me some of the secret spots to go fishing. He's an amazing gardener. We try to grow as much of our food here as we can, because grocery stores we have a grocery store, but our produce comes from Seattle, so sometimes it's not great. I know that I can call Lauren at 3:00 in the morning and he'll be there for me no matter what. So that's kind of a little bit of a reference to what I'm talking about when I'm talking about anchors and looking at them from both our personal and our professional lives, right? The connection between you and your anchor is a two-way street. Derek talked about this earlier. If you are not ready to catch those strings, if you're not there waiting and wanting of those strings, they won't be added to your web won't thicken. And so it's a two-way street. It's a mutual process, right? You have to be ready to catch those strings. It's a very intentional relationship. Excuse me. There were many reasons for me to connect with Lauren. His experience taught me a ton in education. He had really similar ways of interacting with kids and seeing kids as I did. And so our conversations made sense to each other. He challenged me a lot. He had a little bit more of a little more structured way of looking at things than I did then. And so he challenged me to think out of my comfort zone a bit. We could share ideas. We had mutual respect. We could talk to each other, and we knew it would stay between us. So even sometimes our offices were places one of us could go and just vent, and we knew that was it. It was safe. It wouldn't go anywhere else. I say was because Lauren has now retired and I miss him dearly at school, but I still see him out of school in the community. So webs, right? Webs are important both in school and out of school. There's a man named Parker Palmer, and he wrote a book called The Courage to Teach. I'm not sure if anybody's read that book. I haven't read the whole thing, but I've done some research into it. And one of the things that he focused on, or that he said in his book, was live divided no more. Live divided no more. And when we think about that as teachers, we are community members that teach. We're community members first. Palmer's book encouraged relationship building, not only between teachers and students, because we know building relationships encourages academic performance, but between teachers and members of their community, so that teachers had interactions and places to be that were outside of that school building. We also know that youth web up better if we integrate into the communities. Our webs are thickened if we integrate into our communities. And we want to live in a community that's well webbed. So again, like I said earlier, that the fact that your community is taking this on as an initiative will only increase the thriving in your community as you go along. And in turn, the connection builds academic success for our students and makes our teaching in our classrooms a little bit easier, right? Takes that really, really hard job and makes that teaching a little bit easier. So I sent some handouts, and I hope you were either able to print them, or if you weren't able to print them, that's okay, don't worry. They're all very simple, so you could just use a piece of paper and sketch it out on a piece of paper. So the first thing that I really want you to think about is, you'll see that on the screen, this Venn diagram, and it's a Venn diagram where we're gonna think about who the people are that are in our professional web, who the people are that are in our personal web. So who are those anchors, those people that we catch strings from, that we could reach out to, and think beyond just reaching out till 3 in the morning, right? Those are those anchors that we're super tight with, that no matter what. But there's other people on our webs, like I have another colleague that I work with, Kirsch, and she is an amazing thinker and processor of information. I reach out to her all the time about, Kirsch, how are we going to make this square peg fit in this round hole, right? Like, what are we going to do to solve this conundrum? I probably wouldn't call Kirsch at 3 in the morning. We're not quite that connected to call her at 3 in the morning, right? So think about these adults, these anchors, these people that you catch strings from, some of those tangible and intangible strings that Derek talked about earlier, some of the things that build your web, that keep you webbed up. And sometimes those people are going to cross between those two sectors, right? They're going to cross between professional and personal. And those people that cross between those two, put in the center. So when I say go, I want you to take a few minutes to complete the Anchoring Your Web of Support handout. Think about those anchors in your personal and your professional lives. And then as you write the names of the anchors, please leave a little space around them, because we're going to add some information to this later. All right, go, and we'll just give you a few minutes to complete this.
Oh my God. Like in the summertime, we watched the movie. I stopped took them like, hey, this thing got a little scar right here. Which she always, sister was bad. My wife's in the front always, so she's pushing, you know, she gets to the next one. You don't want to grab and stop. Part of this, like, she pushes forward. And I got out and grabbed Michelle's back over there, and a wave hit the boat. And then I just went back to, I had some super glue, and I just super glued it on.
That's probably what they would have done in the hospital.
And we had
Okay, about 30 more seconds to finish up as many of those adults that you can add on that Venn diagram as possible. Okay, finish up writing that last name. Awesome. I hope you have lots of anchors on your Venn diagram. All right, so let's think about these people that you added to your Venn diagram. And we have these two separate circles with an area in the center. And when we think about one of the things, and I've talked to teachers about this recently, is we think I have a professional web and I have a personal web, and those webs don't interact very often. And one of the pieces I want to kind of help people change their thinking, my goodness, excuse me, is that we have a web, right? We have a web, we have one web, and that includes people that are in our personal web and people that are in our professional web. And what to help change that way of thinking a little bit, I want you to think for a second about, as those circles move closer together and more of those people become in that center, and I don't mean to say that your personal anchors become part of your professional web in the sense that they come to school or that they become teachers or any of that, but that they understand that they understand a part of your profession. So for example, my partner Danny, he is a heavy equipment operator, and so other than his children being in school and him being in school when that was a long time ago, he didn't really have a lot of understanding of my professional life when we first started seeing one another. And as our relationship has gotten stronger, he's learned about my professional life. So that piece of him understanding what it's like to be a teacher in a small school, or what it's like to be a principal at a school, and maybe I don't have as much time to give to our relationship when I'm a principal at a school, because I have to be at every basketball game, I have to be at every event at the school, I have to be at every board meeting, right? So my time is taken up, and him learning about that professional piece of my life has kind of made that three different areas, the personal, professional, and the center of the Venn diagram, become closer, so that we're actually looking at my web as a whole versus my role as a teacher and my role outside of my profession. And it's a big deal. We want our kids to see us, our students in our classes, to see us as having various roles. We are more than just teachers in their classrooms. And it helps grow our relationship with them when they see that we have roles outside of just in that classroom. So sometimes sharing personally with your professional life and professionally with your personal life helps deepen that connection with the people that are in your web. And that connection, as it deepens, just thickens your web more, right? If you have a stronger relationship with your anchors, deeper connections with them, you're catching more strings, you're ready to catch more strings, you notice things in them that you might not have noticed before. So you're looking for those strings strong in people that you know better, and you're able to catch more. So thinking about our roles, really important. And if you're a teacher, always you're only a teacher, right? And we all have those different roles. And the important piece of our students and our relationships building, one of the important pieces is that they respect us, not as who we are at that moment, not in the role that we're playing at that moment in school as their teacher, but that they respect us and have knowledge and understanding of us as who we are as people. And that includes all those roles that we play. So we're going to do a little Mentimeter next. So I will share my screen again. And on your secondary device, or on that other tab that you have open in your browser, well, I want you to answer the question of, where are you connecting with people in your community? Think of places that you go the school is included, the school's part of your community, but where do you connect with people in your community? And just go ahead and start inputting some responses, and they'll pop up on the nice after school events. Great. Church, neighborhood, school. Good. Laundromat, that's a great one. Some of the best conversations probably happen at the laundromat, right? Oh, nice. Your children's sporting events. So your role as a parent comes in there. I like that. The grocery store. Oh yeah, I get some of the best conversations at the grocery store here too. Second job, I'm assuming that job is outside of education, so you connect with a different group of people. Daycare, yeah. Coffee house. I wish we had a coffee house here that I could go connect with people. I like this because a lot of these are showing exactly what what I was talking about a minute ago, about how we have different roles, right? And those different roles then allow us to be connected with more people, and then to deepen those connections. Nice. At the university, playing in a band. Nice, nice. Great. So you'll see from this that there are lots of places that we can connect with other people. And I noticed somebody in the chat said, not out and about much these days because of COVID. Very true, right? Very true that our whole social structure has changed with COVID. And sometimes, like, nobody put it on here, I don't think yet, but we do Zoom meetings with my family sometimes, or some of my girlfriends and I, we have coffee over Zoom sometime, because sometimes when we weren't able to be out and about and do things together. So we're modifying kind of how we socialize, but still making sure that that time gets in there so that our connections can deepen, so that we can reach out to those people that are in our web. Wonderful. Thank you for this. Thank you for these responses. Nice job. Oh, volunteering. That's a good one. Yep. Yep. Great. All right. So thank you for thinking a little bit about where you connect with people in your community. So data. Derek talked a little bit about data in his, when he was doing his, we call that the napkin talk, when he drew the picture of the web of support. And I just want to kind of share a little bit of data with you that we've collected over the years. Some of the work that we do in Alaska is paid for through some federal grants. And so as a requirement to those federal grants, of course, there's some pretty strict data collection things that we have to do. So when we talk about data, we have three kind of things that we measure data by. We want it to be meaningful. We want data to make sense to people. We want people to understand that the data we're collecting has meaning to the people that we're collecting the data from. So do our adults and youth that we work with find meaning in this story, in this work that we do? And yeah, you know, they do really find meaning in it. The second thing we want is we want it to be memorable. If you really took a few minutes, you could tell that story that Derek told, right? You could tell that napkin talk story. He broke it down into simple components. If you think about love, shine it through the prism of science, you get Roy G. Biv. Red are those anchors, orange and yellow are the tangible and intangible strings that create the web. Green is the balloon sits on top of the web, hopefully staying on top and not falling down beneath the web very often to where those risk factors will living. Blue are scissors cuts, things that happen to the web, sometimes in the control of the youth, sometimes out of the control, they get to decide, right? Indigo, caring for the cares, not only do our youth need a web, but we need a web around us. And then violet, social norms, that wind that can blow and keep that web buoyant and that balloon on top of that web. So you could tell that story. You could tell it to others so that that story is memorable, and we want to collect data about things that are memorable. And then is it measurable? And we're not going to talk about it today, but we do have a mechanism with which we measure the web of support underneath the teenagers that we use this work with. So just some data from those Alaska grants. We measure youth to adult connectedness. And between 2012 and 2015, the number of anchors in youth's lives grew from 3 to 5. And the depth of connection, how tightly those youth and adults were connected, doubled in that amount of time. That's the most important one to me. It's all important. But to me, we want adults and youth to deepen their connections, right? So that they can work together to build a thicker web. I'm not going to read all these other ones. You can see on the bottom the orange and yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet data. Also increased in that period of time. We also have we have ongoing grants. And so there's some more data that was collected through those grants where we measured academic data. And we came up with the kids that participated. So of course we measured the data for that cohort that participated in the grant activities. And we saw a 4% increase in math, a 1.3 increase in reading, an 8% increase in overall GPA. And student and adults connections increased from that number 5 there on average to about 8.3 adults in their lives. So some of those kids were involved in the grant, the very first grant that we started in 2012 and went all the way through 2017 and 18. So they went from that 3 to that 8.5. So we had some pretty good increase there. And the depth of connection continued to increase another 22%. So when we present this story to kids, they get it. It is meaningful to them. It is measurable to them. They look at their student support card data and are able to see where they have grown. One thing it's really important to know is our webs are very dynamic. It could be that one day my data is really, really strong. My web of support is really, really strong, and something happens and I take my assessment later and that my web might be a little less strong, and I might take it later and it's strong again. And it's really valuable for us to be able to talk to our students about that data. I had a great conversation one time with a student who had gone from like 3 anchors in his life to only 1 anchor in his life in these 2 different data sets. And so I pulled him in my office one day and I said, Jimmy, I said, explain this to me. What do you think's going on? And he was fascinated that you could tell and that he could see his data. And he had a whole story about what had happened. And the next time he took it, his red score had gone up again. So kids value that data. And if the data is not valuable to the kids, then what's the value of the data, right? It's really important for them to value it. All right, we're not going to spend a lot of time on data because it's kind of boring. And if you want more information on data, we can talk about that later. All right, so we're going to move on a little bit to strings, talking about strings that Derek mentioned earlier, those orange and yellow strings in our webs of support. And this word cloud that's on the screen now is an example of those tangible and intangible strings that thicken our webs. And this example of strings is from a group of educators. So we have a group of strings that are very research-based for students. And now we have a group of orange and yellow strings that are from educators that we've worked with. And this is just some of them. There's more. Actually, one of your handouts should be a list of all of those educator strings. There's orange and yellow strings, 2 lists on each side. As we think about these strings, I want you to think for a second about who do we catch the strings from? I said earlier it was a mutual exchange. Anchors throw the strings and we catch them. And we have to be ready to catch what they're throwing, right? So I want you to, so it's really important that we know who we catch those strings from. For example, Lauren, I catch strings like thinking out of the box. I catch strings from him like open-mindedness and non-judgmental thinking about kids and adults, right? Those are strings that I noticed in him that I had a little bit in me. That's like, I knew that was right, but I didn't quite know how to use it. I didn't know how to stand up for myself and say that that's truly what I value and how I could present that to people in ways that would make sense. So Lauren helped me develop that. He supported me in becoming one of those people that can say, and I can say it out loud to groups of people now when they start talking negatively about students or adults. Wait a minute, do you know that? Or are we making assumptions? And we have to assume that they're doing the very best that they can at the moment. And he supported me in growing that string and catching those strings to be able to say those things out loud and to really know that what I believe in my gut is right. So using your Venn diagrams that you made earlier, I want you to, beside the name of each of those people that you wrote on your Venn diagram, each of those anchors, please take a few minutes to think about what strings you catch from them. So if Lauren was on mine, I would write non-judgmental thinking. I would write honesty next to those things that I catch from Lauren. I would write from my mom, communication, huge. My mom teaches me communication. From from Danny, from my partner Danny, huge fun. One of the things we always focus on is we have fun together. So take a few minutes to write the strings that you catch next to those anchors, and remember to keep a focus on that mutual exchange. It's a mutual exchange. You have to catch what they're throwing. Okay, about 30 more seconds to finish writing the strings that you catch from your anchors. Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to do another Mentimeter activity. And for this Mentimeter activity, so we've just spent some time thinking about the anchors that we have in our lives, those adults that are caring and connected and that we can reach out to for support and that we can catch strings from in order to thicken our web. And because the other piece that we've talked a lot about, and I'm going to keep pushing back to that piece, is teachers as community members first. And so I want you to think about combining the two Mentimeter things that we've talked about so far, where you connect with other people in your community, in the school and outside of the school, and strings. And for now, you've thought about strings that you catch. Now I want you to think about some of the strings that you can throw. I want you to think about some of the strings that you can throw to others in your community. Now that could be in school, but I really want you to stretch a little bit and think about what kind of strings do you throw outside of school. So if, for example, you attend a faith-based organization on the weekends, what strings do you throw there? Or do you throw the string of patience? Do you throw the string of compassion? And go ahead and enter those responses in your Mentimeter. Great, we got a good start. Unconditional love, joy, caring, active listening, good. Safety, a safe place to talk. Positivity, oh, a desire to learn, that's a good one. And you know, even though we throw that one at school a lot, I would venture to guess that you throw that one everywhere, that string everywhere you go. If you're a true learner, you can learn in all the environments, all the roles that you play, right? Positive energy, confidence. Oh, nice. There's excitement for learning again. Patience and understanding. Boy, in this time, this COVID stuff, that whole giving grace and sharing some patience and understanding is pretty powerful, right? I know it's one of the things I've really worked with with the teachers in our schools, and that you know, have some patience. People are going to give us grace because we're doing our best. We're trying as hard as we can, and we're learning right along with them, right? Having a voice at the table, nice. You know, that's one of the things I think our kids sometimes think they don't have a voice at the table. And if we can provide that opportunity for them in safe places like community organizations or schools or faith-based organizations, it gives them an opportunity to practice before they go out on their own, so to speak. Lots of positivity, I like that. Flexibility. Humor is one of my favorite strings. Compassion, safe place to talk. I've seen that a couple of times. That's wonderful. Non-judgmental. Empathy, acceptance. Oh, curiosity, right? We want to share things like curiosity so that our students and the people around us are looking at what's happening and what's new and the why of things, right? That whole, what we call it, a wonder gene a little bit, like, why are things the way they are? Acceptance. Yeah. I know you guys had a training this morning on implicit bias, right? And a lot of these strings that you're listing up here seem to fit along with being aware of implicit bias. Good. Showing gratitude. We talk about that when we talk with people about indigo, and showing like real gratitude, like not just, hey, thank you. At one time I was in my office when I was a counselor, and this teacher came in and she was crying like 3-year-old tears and snot and everything, right? Like you can't breathe. And I was like, Brenda, what is wrong? And she said, Amy, I've never taught in a building where she was the math teacher. I actually had a student today say, hey, Miss O, thanks for teaching me about quadratic equations. I never understood them before, and now I get it. And she said, never have I been in a school where kids are that open to show gratitude. yeah, it was a pretty cool conversation for her. And she was so touched, right? That gratitude meant so much to her. Very powerful. Wonderful. Yeah, some people said their Mentimeter must not be working. So I'm just looking at the chat. Oh, basic culinary course for foster kids. Nice, nice. Students have a voice, showing them compassion and caring. Let's see. Kindness and loyalty, non-judgmental and compassion. Nice. Great. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Sorry that some of the Menti pages, you might try reloading your page. Sometimes that will work. Anyway, great strings that you throw into your community. I appreciate this. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but we will share these Menti slides with your administration. So if you have a desire to have this information later, you can have it too. Awesome. So I am going to pass this along to Kyra. And Kyra is, she lives in Muncie, you guys. She's one of you. She's not Amy chiming in from Alaska or Derek chiming in from North Dakota, right? She's one of you guys. She's in your community and she gets webs of support in a huge way. And she's gonna talk for a few minutes on the community initiative and maybe how the community initiative might help teachers and provide ongoing support for teachers in Muncie. So you're on, Kyra.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Amy. No, I'm so glad to be here. You guys, I'm thrilled that Amy and Derek could be here with us today. I'm only disappointed that you can't be in the room with them because the energy that they bring and the interactions and the connection face-to-face is just so powerful. But as she said, my name is Kyra Zylstra. I'm a longtime Muncie resident. I'm also a proud MCS parent, and I get to represent the Web of Support initiative here in Muncie. And we're excited because the message that they're bringing and the introduction they're sharing today isn't just a one-time workshop. And that's one of the most exciting things about how we have chosen to partner with them, is that this is the first step of a journey in school and community partnership that is coming together and throwing all these strings to help us be a stronger, more resilient, and more connected community. So over the last decade, the Muncie Action Plan has consistently heard from citizens that there's a need to identify mentoring programs, right? This is always one of those things that comes up in those community discussions. And in looking at some of those options as a community, there's a few different players who said, wait a minute, we found this Web of Support model. Let's explore this a little more. We were able to bring Derek here last November and then did our first big kickoff training in January. But the purpose of bringing Web of Support as a mentoring model is to create new opportunities for youth, to help connect them with adults and to help them be successful both in the classroom and in their lives. One of the things that I love about the Web of Support model is that it integrates into the existing relationships and organizations we already have. We don't have to start another program. We get to amplify the connections that are already being made with youth. And Derek talks very passionately about the difference between typical mentoring and anchoring. He'll say all anchors are mentors, but not all mentors are anchors because of the way that their efforts build. It builds different connections when you're an anchor that have a more significant impact on a youth's life. And one of those things that makes Web of Support so powerful is that it creates this light bulb moment. Often when we share this message, people go, wait, I'm already doing this. Yes, you are. You're already doing this. I know this personally. You're already doing this. But learning about the framework will create a way to illuminate those connections. So we're connecting, we're anchoring, we're mentoring already. But as we see it and we go, oh, we start to see in full color. It's a way to engage on a different level that says, okay, I see how this is connected to this part. And that's how we see those successes being made. And in establishing Web of Support as a community initiative that partners with the school, we're able to provide that common language and that full color culture shift that weaves the web of support into all the different parts of the community. So youth are hearing the same messages from their teachers, their guidance counselors, their principals, that they're hearing from their after-school programs, their community centers, their neighborhoods, their churches, and their parents. We want this to be an initiative that integrates into what's already being done, to strengthen it, to amplify it, and to create that language that says, who are your anchors? So when your teacher asks that, you think about that in terms as a student, but then you can also have a parent that says, how are you connecting with those anchors? And can we take a step further and then start to create those anchors so that parents are supporting the relationships that their students have with their teachers, which I think is really important as we start to look at that language. And one of the things I really value about this language is that it is inclusive of the diverse ecologies that our students are coming from. As Derek said, the research and the data will show it doesn't really matter if it's a big family or if it's, you know, a network of different support systems. All of those people coming together is really where we start to see that statistical difference in the success of a student. And we get to focus on strengthening them where they're at. So as we took this first step in our community, as I said, back in January, we pulled together some of you, some of your students. We had 50 high school students, 50 students from Central, and 50 adults. So this was a mix of teachers and administrators and community leaders, grassroots people who are already involved in youth programming. And we did 2 days, 2 full days with Derek, which was amazing. And as we got that started and we started training them to share that message, then of course the world kind of has changed in the last 8 months and in the way that we're able to connect. So we find ourselves now starting to reimagine what this web of support network looks like in Muncie and looking for new ways to stay connected. So we're here today to kind of present this to everyone and say, this is exciting as we move forward in both supporting teachers and supporting community organizations to do this. And so we're looking to have you partner with us to support what you're doing, to amplify your successes. We want your expertise and your insights and the ideas that you have to start expanding that network and increasing those connections in the community. The other exciting part of this being a community initiative is that it's not just limited to youth. Because as you've seen today, as Amy led you through this activity, you have your own web, and we want adults, we want families to be webbed up. And so youth are best anchored by those who have a strong web themselves. And so we want to partner with employers, with businesses, with service providers to continue integrating that web of support message, that common language, into the ways that we support adults and families throughout the community. So that as people are stepping out for help, we have service providers and employers who are even saying, okay, what's going on here? Something has changed for you. We have this conversation about the web in lots of different ways. And so I love that we have the ability for you to think about the places where do you see youth? You know, where are you already seeing the strengthening happening in Muncie? And where would you like to see that full color lens expanded? So obviously it's the classroom, it's your home, it's your church, it's your neighborhood. And we want to stay connected with you as you do that. And as you start to apply these web of support principles and start to change the way that we talk to youth possibly about their mentoring and about their anchoring. So we want to stay connected with you. We're on social media. We've got some student developed emails coming out, which we're excited about, and one-on-one discussions. Let us know your thoughts, your ideas, your questions. You know, like Amy said, I'm here. Like, my kids are in your classrooms. We love what Muncie schools are doing. We're seeing great successes. And when I asked my 3rd grader about who webs her up, she excitedly proclaims, "It's my whole school," right? And we know from the research that's a pretty typical response for that age, but she's getting it. She's feeling the love and support that you guys are providing. And we really love that. And so we really want to be able to feature that to the community, to share those positive successes and say, look at what Muncie's doing as a school and as a whole community, so that we can continue to build on those successes. And as Derek always says, all kids are our kids. So we're excited to partner with you for the success of all of our children.
Kyra, you're amazing. Thank you. Thank you. I love your energy. And boy, you guys, I'd love to have somebody like Kyra in my community. Awesome. Nicely done. So just a couple of things to recap. We only have about 15 more minutes. And Kyra said this beautifully. This is a story for everybody. Everybody needs a web. Big balloons, small balloons, youth, adults, everybody needs a lens. It's really a lens. I'm sorry. Everybody needs a web. My mouth is faster than my brain. It's really a lens to see everybody in full color. There's no at-risk youth. There's no good or bad. They're just youth. They're just people, right? And when we see them in full color, then we can see and share their unique gifts, their talents, and it just creates connection. It creates a safe and comfortable environment between people. I'm just going to say people, not youth, not adults. It's just people, right? And one of the things that I always try to do here in my community is I participate as much as I can. And I say that very carefully because I understand the time commitment of a teacher in the schools. So I don't want you to think that I am saying, oh, add one more thing to your plate. That is not at all what I'm saying. I work really hard to choose activities in my community that bring me joy and help me connect with my community. I don't participate in all of them. There's no way, right? So I find the ones that give me joy and I participate in those events to interact with both youth and the students in my school and the parents of the students in my school and other community members. And I think often about those different roles that we play, right? We play a community member, we play a teacher, we play a parent maybe, we play a partner or a significant other to somebody else. You know, there's lots of different roles that we play. And I'm trying to make sure that my community doesn't only see me as a teacher. I want my students and my parents to see me in roles outside of my teacher role. So one of the ways I do that in Thorn Bay is that every August we have a big birthday celebration of when our community we were a logging camp for years. We were the biggest logging camp in the world in the 60s. And in 1982, we became a city, like a real government run city instead of a logging camp, which logging camps are run by the camp boss, period, right? So one person sets the rules. This is how camp's going to be. So it was a big transition for our community to go from a logging camp to a city. So we celebrated every year. It was a big deal. And I organized the parade for that community event. And almost every student in our school participates in the parade in one way or another. They ride their bikes. They ride on a float that they make with their families out of a boat on a trailer or a four-wheeler or whatever can have wheels and be pulled or driven. Some of them just ride in vehicles with their parents or other anchors. And it never fails, you guys, that when school starts a few weeks later in August, one of the first things that kids say to me at school is, hey, Miss Amy, wasn't the parade really fun this year? And we have this conversation about Thorn Bay Days and the parade, and their parents come up to me and they're like, hey, thanks for organizing the parade. It was super cool. So it's simple. It takes me maybe 2 hours total, like an hour for the actual boots on the ground and an hour to get things organized. And everybody recognizes me in a role that has nothing to do with school. It builds my connection with people. We have different kinds of conversations, the kids and I do, the adults and I do. There's people that don't have children that come up to me and say, Amy, this is a great parade. How can I volunteer to make it better next year? Like, you know, just this huge, like, great feeling of people coming together, and it doesn't take me very much time. So it brings me a huge amount of joy. So I want you to think about that, things that bring you joy, and also you can do logically. We know our time is super valuable as teachers, and I would never ask you to add to your plate. But just kind of thinking about maybe rearranging the things on your plate a little bit to find time to be in your community, building relationships with people outside, being a role outside of a teacher. And the last thing I'll say about that, and you guys know this, that when we have positive relationships with our students and their families, their anchors, teaching becomes easier to us and learning becomes more readily available to our students. And really, as far as teachers, that's what we want, you guys, right? That's what we want, the heart and soul of teaching. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to thank you, first of all, for your time. I know it's afternoon where you are, and I hope the sun is out. We have some sun out here, which we don't get a lot of in Southeast Alaska. So I hope you'll enjoy a wonderful weekend, and thank you for sharing some time with us today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Derek.
Hey, folks. We're going to have a little Mentimeter evaluation come up, but I want to recap 3 things. I want to recap first, it's about intentionality. And so Abraham Maslow, who did some of his work, research work in Indiana, never put his hierarchy in a pyramid. That happened after his death. Google it. You can Google it. And when I was meeting with the Abraham Maslow scholar in Bloomington about 10 years ago, he was telling me, Abraham would have loved you because we didn't have the data on protective factors and learning supports back in the 50s and 60s when he was doing his work. But he said, because we can measure things differently now, you kind of figured it out. The fact that what we want is a web. We want a combination of these protective factors, because we all know as teachers that we know some kids who run away from home because, and that's a basic need in the pyramid, which he never created, to pursue safety and belonging, or to pursue their art or their music. True story. One of my babysitters growing up with Jessica Lange, the Academy Award winning actress, and little rural town. And for most of my growing up, she was always thought of as a ne'er-do-well because she left one place and some security for serving tables in LA. And the rest of the story is she did just fine. Jessica did just fine. It's a filter. The Web of Support is a filter. It will filter out the crime and the grime for kids to make trauma and some of the stuff happening in the media less impactful on them. You all know, as teachers and as moms and dads and uncles and aunts, you are constantly reframing and filtering what you might see on a social media post, what you might see on NBC or CBS news at night, or what you read online. Think about kids who are thinly webbed, who don't have 5 caring adults in their life, who have maybe 0, 1, or 2, and think of how less likely they are to have things filtered for them, like a conspiracy theory, or like the impact of violence that they see on TV happening in one community or another. Kids with webs of support, we oftentimes even call them dream catchers, like we hang on our windows here in North Dakota, that those act as filters, letting the good pass through and the bad sometimes get filtered out. When I was in Alaska, people were always asking me to pick sides. Derek, webs of support, you're doing work all over the state. Who are you voting for, Democrat or Republican? And of course, as a statewide person, you never answer that question. And so finally, after some pressure, I did answer it. I put it up on the website, and I had a website come up. And on that was 2 big buttons: how Democrats build webs of support and how Republicans build webs of support. And oh, people were so excited. Derek had finally picked, had finally chosen. And you all know what happened. When you hit the Democrat button or the Republican button, it went to the same page, because these are oftentimes American values and human values. And of course, every culture, every neighborhood, every family, every religion, every faith is going to have a little bit of different way of communicating the values. And that web will look a little bit different. But the truth is, it is a web. And when people are webbed up, they tend to have American values. They tend to persevere. They tend to do well in school. They tend to stay in the circle and have a debate and argue principles. They tend to be more thoughtful. And if it doesn't freak you out yet, in our data sets, 38% of kids that we measure in Muncie, in wealthy neighborhoods, and in very rural places are disconnected and disaffected and disassociated. And guess what? They vote and they build businesses and they participate and they are wondering if and how this whole thing works. The thickly webbed kids, 40%, 5 or more. Our record is 27. It's very common in each school to have some kids who have 13, 15, 18 anchors that they can list on their student support card, and they're sitting right next to a kid who has 0. You and I teach these kids, right? These kids are a part of our economy, a part of our country, a part of our future. Guess what? They're disconnected. The thickly webbed ones are doing well. We call it, they have more money, they have a better family, they have better, you know what? Those variables are not as powerful as the web. And someday I hope Amy and I get a chance to show you more. You've just got a little taste, but we can show you data that says, by looking at someone's socioeconomic background, by looking at somebody's parental education level, by looking at somebody's size of their house, those are not as good of predictors of student performance in your classroom as how thick their web of support is. Just because somebody's rich doesn't mean they have a thick web. So Amy, I'm going to turn it back to you. You can get them back on Mentimeter so they can do their evaluations. Muncie, I will be back there shortly. I'm on the phone with Kyra and her team once a week at least. I will see you soon. Thank you, Muncie, and Amy, back to you.
I'm muted. Thanks, Derek. Great wrap up. I really appreciate it. And thanks for your time and your support today, Derek. It's been amazing. So we are going to do one more Menti slide. And so I just want to preface this a little bit. This slide is so that Kyra can continue her amazing work in Muncie. And it's going to give Kyra some data to follow up on after this, after we're done with our time together today. So please answer. It's just 3 quick questions. And when you answer these questions on your Menti app, the group won't see the answers to them. It'll just go into a spreadsheet for Kyra. So answer them as, we're not sharing emails with the whole group or any of that. So just wanted to clarify. So if you could just we have about 5 more minutes. So if you take however much time you need to answer those 3 questions, and I will say thank you for your time and your attention and your participation and for caring for kids deeply. Thanks. When you're done with those, we are done today. Also, if anybody, we'll stay on for a little bit if anybody has questions they want to ask. We'll stay for a little bit if anybody has any questions. Thanks.
Kyra, it's Derek. I just put in the chat that we'll share a Muncie specific napkin talk on Monday morning. And for the teachers who want to get it, they can get access to it through you. Okay. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
I see that we still have 40 souls on, and if they want to, if they're staying to ask questions, they sure can put them in the chat, and we'll be glad to stay here as long as they want to chat. I do think in these times of uncertainty, it's and COVID, needing to be resilient is at the top of everybody's mind, I think, for our kids and ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. That whole resiliency piece has a whole different meaning, it feels like. More specific meaning.
Yeah, Carol, I think your work with art, you live and work in full color. And sometimes as an art teacher, we talk about kids who oftentimes are thinly webbed and who kind of saw themselves as black and white, which meant good kid, bad kid, smart kid, not so smart kid, talented kid, not so talented. Once they start seeing in full color, you as an art teacher, I'm sure, are doing constructivism where you might even have a kid do paint by numbers, right? Put the red here, put the yellow here. And we have lessons like that through Brightway. But literally we want kids to become artists of their own life and of their own web. And that web is, like, as you know, constantly changing and evolving as they move from middle school to high school, elementary to middle school to high school into the world, as they encounter different people who become their anchors and some drop out. And it really is how to be an artist of your own life's trajectory and your own dream catcher. So thank you, Carol. Nice job.
Thank you, Derek. I appreciate it.
Carol, just a little addition to that. We one of the activities that we do in my school district is we do these lock-in events where a whole bunch of kids come with adults and we talk about the story. And a couple of years ago, we had an art corner at our event. Yeah, it was super cool. And kids created some amazing art based on the story and how it applies to their life. And I mean, more than just the napkin talk or the Roy G. Biv colors, but really, what does anchoring mean? What kind of strings are important? What are the social norms in their communities? Yeah, it was really powerful. We had a teacher in our district who, we don't have any specific art teachers, but she's very artistic. And
Sure.
She offered to do it, and it was amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's so powerful.
Yeah, I only regret that I didn't take pictures of their art because I let them take them, right? But I don't have any record of it because it was pretty cool. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thanks.
For those of you who are still on, one thing I think that's amazing is, and we designed it this way, is that the kids get it. The kids often get it quicker than the adults get it because we adults tend to take our web of support for granted. And if you were a baby boomer like me, you were raised to think that it's all about you and all about self-esteem and all about your self-agency and self-efficacy. And that's green, that's important. But there's this web of support that we all had. And so it's kind of fun to have kids see that for the first time and go, holy cow, do I have this or do I not? And it does increase their self-agency.
Okay. I started it at home.
Amy and Kyra, I am off. It looks like people are moving on to other things. Thank goodness they have full days. And I will talk to you either this afternoon or later, okay?
Wonderful.
Thank
you,
guys.
Derek.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kyra.
I'll talk to you later, Amy. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you.
And you're welcome to close this out, I think.
Okay, awesome. Have a great weekend.
Bye.